Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. All who love me will keep my words, and my Father will love them, and we will come to them. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "As the Father loves me, so I also love you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy might be complete. This is my commandment. Love one another as I love you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know what his master is doing. I call you friends, because I have told you everything I have heard from my Father. It was not you who chose me, but I who chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. This is my command. Love one another." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus
A prominent Jewish rabbi was asked which books of the Old Testament are the most important to the Jewish community. Now, surprisingly, he began to talk about the book of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus. This is largely a book of laws, spelling out in practical terms how to remain in relationship with God, how to remain in union with God, how to be faithful with God, how to love God. And there are hundreds of these laws in the book of Leviticus. The careful reader of Leviticus soon realizes that many of the laws have to do with mercy and compassion toward the lonely, the stranger, the widow, the orphan, the poor, the slave. And buried in the midst of this long litany of laws is a commandment that we are all familiar with. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. What Leviticus is saying is that one of the ways of remaining in union with God is to love other people. That God wants his people to demonstrate their fidelity to him, their loyalty to him, their love of him, through their love of one another. Now, centuries later, toward the end of Jesus' life, questions were being hurled at him in those closing days. Some of them are sincere. There are sincere attempts to find out information, to find out truth. But some of them are attempts to trap Jesus, to give an answer that will condemn him. Something, perhaps, that would go against the book of Leviticus. And so the last question that comes in: what is the greatest of the commandments? Of all these hundreds and hundreds of practical laws laid down in Leviticus, which is the most important? That was the question. You shall love the Lord your God with your whole being, Jesus answers. But then he goes on to say, there's a second one that is like the first. You shall love your neighbor. Again and again and again in Jesus' ministry, Jesus demonstrates ways of tying these two great commandments together through his parables, his teachings, his miracles, his prayers, his example. When we think of it, it sounds easy enough. Just one really central commandment, centered on love. Love one another as I have loved you. We have plenty of opportunities to do this. Whether it's the love of a parent for a child, the love between spouses, the love that binds friends over many years and life experiences, the love of conflict for one another. This love, this kind of love, flows freely. It warms our hearts. We love these people, and it brings us joy, great joy. But in speaking to his disciples, Jesus doesn't leave well enough alone. Jesus takes it one step further. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. This statement makes me want to take pause. There are people for whom I would lay down my life. But admittedly, that circle, sadly, is small. Why did Jesus bring this idea of sacrifice into the picture? There are times when we struggle to love, when we need to let go of status or beliefs in order to love those who make it challenging. This kind of love requires us to sacrifice something of ourselves. Maybe not a sacrifice of our life, but something of ourselves. We see this sacrificial love in marriage when hurtful acts are committed by a spouse, or in monasteries when hurtful acts are committed by a confrere, or in friendships when there is betrayal or rejection, neglect. We see this in parents struggling to love a child caught up in the grip of addiction. We see this in situations when words of hatred are spewed forth, disguising ignorance and fear underneath. Certainly some of this was seen in the George Floyd episode this past year. Certainly we see it in racial tensions. Sacrificial love requires work. Admitting we're wrong. Seeking forgiveness. Stepping out of our comfort zones in order to see from another's perspective. Black Lives Matter. And in defense, some of us quickly offer the rejoinder, oh, white lives matter too. When my sister spouted this at a family gathering, I pointed out, we, being white, know that our lives matter. Or we, being family members, know that our lives matter. But many can't break out of these familiar circles, these comfort zones. Don't realize that others truly matter too. And it takes some work for us to come to that. Black Lives Matter. And it's good for us to remember this. Putting our feet in someone else's shoes. Stepping out of our own circles. We rarely approach this kind of love out of joy, because it's a challenge. There's denial. Jesus' simple commandment involves both kinds of love, that which is easy and that which involves struggle. Stepping out of our own shoes and into another's. When we are able to love by laying down our lives in some way, by loving despite the struggle, the challenge, despite the difference we experience, when we do that, it's a complete love. It's one that fills us. One that Jesus says fills us with joy. Today's gospel, Jesus says to his disciples, you will live in my love if you keep my commandments, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and live in his love. All this I tell you, that my joy may be yours and your joy may be complete. This is my commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. There's no greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. The command I give to you is this. It's a command he gives to us, that you love one another. But Leviticus says that one of the ways of remaining in union with God is to love other people. That God wants his people to demonstrate their fidelity to him, their loyalty, their love of him, through their love for neighbor. This is my commandment. Love one another.